What are Chad Varka's biggest pros and cons? That's what I'm here to tell you today. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Okay, so, I understand that this character has some issues, but usually I structure these videos by going through the positives first, and then the negatives second. So while I am fully aware that there are quite the negatives to discuss, I am gonna go through the pros first. And contrary to what you might think, no, I do not think this is some irredeemable unit that's absolutely terrible. But anyways, to start off with his pros, one of them is that he's going to be a really good shield breaker. This is pretty straightforward. He is going to be an animo DPS that's also going to be able to take advantage of elemental infusions, thus he is going to be a fantastic shield breaker. Consider how Chaska is also a really good shield breaker. This is mostly just a nice additional bonus of his, but I still feel like it's worth highlighting because it's a unique quality that he's able to take advantage of, especially because he's an infusions-based DPS. Another pro of his that I think is a little bit more prevalent is his team building flexibility. He does have a best-in-slot core consisting of Durin, Venti, and then Bennett. However, Hexerei characters are not exactly hard to come by. If you don't have Venti, then don't worry. You can just use Sucrose instead, because she also received Hexerei buffs. You have some particular conditions that you're going to want to fulfill when it comes to Varka's team. You want 2 Hexerei characters, 2 Animo characters, and 2 Pyro, Hydro, Electro, and Cryo characters. If you fulfill all of these conditions, then congratulations, you've got yourself a viable Varka team. So you have a budget option available if you weren't able to pick up Venti on his last rerun. And the core you use on the end does not require Durin. Durin is going to be the best option, definitely, but you don't need him in order to use Varka, even if he is going to end up being best in slot, because that's the nice thing here. Hexerei buffs were extended to plenty of other characters. And the double element core that you use on the end can actually be pretty flexible. You don't have to use double Pyro, you can use double Hydro if you want to, and that is a very well established core in the game at this point. So all around, you have options, and you're not restricted to building his team in any one particular way. Now, if you feel like his damage is lacking, then what you can do instead is play Columbina and Nefa on the end of his team, which, yes, is technically wheelchairing him, but it's a viable option regardless. Generally, your best-in-slot team is going to consist of having both Venti and Durin, but all around, you are not restricted to having to follow such team building. Now, with that being said, Venti is going to be a really good support for him, so if you manage to pick him up back during his last rerun, or if you got him just way back when some other time, well, then that spells good news for you because he's going to be brilliant with Varka. And if you pulled Venti and Durin specifically in the hopes that they would be good Varka teammates, well then don't worry, that is indeed going to be the case. But all around, if you don't have those teammates or you skip them for some kind of reason, whatever that may be, don't worry, you don't need them. They will be best in slot, but you do not need them. And I would say that's a nice quality of Varka's. Even though his free-to-play level is definitely not as strong as other Lunar characters' free-to-play levels, the point stands that if you're a really big Varka fan and you simply just really want to play the character, you can very much do so even with limited options on your account. Another thing is that he is going to be the next step in completing the Hexerei team core. The reason I say the next step is because I'm not entirely confident that the team core is done. Think about it. We have Varka himself, Venti, Durin, and then Bennett still needs to be replaced in that team if he's ever going to be replaced. And the reason I suggest that may potentially happen is simply because, while this does sound copium, we might just be waiting for Varka to get another teammate so that he can be brought up to the standards of other Lunar DPSs, which is something I'm going to talk about a little bit more later. Granted, that is just pure guesswork. If we want to go off of what we currently know, then Varka is at the very least going to be the Hexerei main DPS of the team. I do think that he could definitely use a new teammate or support in the future, just to kind of boost up his damage a little bit, because I do think he lags behind other 6.x units, but even so, he's gonna be the next step in this team core, so if you've currently already been investing into Hexerei teammates, Varka is going to be the next step in said process. Now, what I will say is that if you want to just keep using Durin and Venti for the time being, and just wait until Varka potentially gets a new support, that is also a viable option because Venti is still a very strong DPS. It does pain me to talk like this about one of my favorite characters, but I do just have to be honest and say, you can get away with just continuing to use Venti as your Animo main DPS, and then pull Varka at a later time when he may potentially be a better character if he ever becomes a better character. But even so, the point stands that yes, he is going to be the intended main DPS for the Hex and Circle team core. Another thing that I should mention is that he's a dual wielder. I'll say that being an infusions-based DPS isn't necessarily anything new, because we already have Chaska in the game, but Varka is the first one to do specifically 2 elements, and he's a real dual-wielder. That is the core of his gimmick. So I'll say he is interesting enough to set himself apart from Chaska and make himself look like an interesting kit design, and I do think that the actual idea behind his kit is really cool and interesting. Though that's more of a nice bonus point than anything else, as whether his kit idea intrigues you or not is completely just going to depend on whether you personally care for the gimmick or not. Okay, now unfortunately we just have to start talking about the cons. The thing is, I do think it's a little overblown because this character is not completely buns. He can perform if you have his signature weapon, and he can be a decent DPS. The real issue more so lies in the fact that he just doesn't line up to the standards of current modern units, and he isn't as good as most Notcry DPSs have been. He's not as good as Moika, he's not as good as Flynn's, he's not as good as Jabai, he's not as good as any of them. In fact, he lags behind by a very noticeable amount. And while you can compensate for this if you get a signature weapon, all the other lunar DPSs, if they don't have their SIGs, at least Flynn's and Jabai, they're still going to be fine. Plenty of 6.x units can get by on much lower investment and do a lot more than Varka can at lower investment, and if you give them their signature weapons, then nothing much really changes. The situation definitely gets better for Varka, but even so, the other characters still just kind of remain as being significantly better than him. Now, I don't necessarily think that Varka is some inherently trash unit, and there is no reason to get him ever. He's fine. He's not broken, but he's fine. Now, I totally understand why people are disappointed about this, because this is the Grandmaster that's been hyped up for so long now, and that's why I'm kind of holding on to the hope that maybe he just gets another teammate down the line. Think of it like this. If Skirk released first and then Escoffier later, everybody would have assumed that Skirk is just some terrible unit. But no, we got Escoffier first and then Skirk. This may just be the reality in which we're seeing Skirk released first. Now, obviously, like I said, that's just really big copium, and don't pull Varka right now based on information that is unconfirmed in the future, because if you pull the unit now, they may never get that buff that you're hoping for them to get, and you ultimately make an investment that you are not satisfied with. So at this current point in time, I would only get him if you really like Varka in particular. I myself intend to dump all of the Primo Gems that I've been saving for these past couple of months all on Varka, because I really, really like the character. His Japanese voice actor is Joseph Joestar, for crying out loud. He's awesome, and he's a really, really cool dude. So I like the character a lot, but there is no denying that he's just not that strong right now compared to other 6.x units, and there are better investments that you could currently be making. I mean, shoot, dude, Jabai came out recently, and that character is insane on, like, barely any cost at all. So with that in mind, I think Varka's biggest outlying flaw is simply just he doesn't feel strong enough for the time period that we're currently in. If this unit came out maybe a year ago, I'm sure everyone would have been really impressed and thought, yep, that is a cool, good unit that is befitting of the Grandmaster and all that. But as it currently stands, he just isn't really impressive enough to really make anyone go, yep, that's the Grandmaster of the Knights of Favonius, definitely very strong, very fitting of his title, wow, what power, what strength, very much in line with other 6.x units. And I feel like that's where the crux of the issue lies. This unit was hyped up for so long, so him being so weak on his release just feels a bit awkward, but even then, I don't necessarily want to say weak outright, because if you have his signature weapon, he's fine. He'll get the job done. He's not going to be complete trash, but I will admit he definitely does feel undertuned right now. Now, if he ends up getting some kind of support to help with this in the future, not only would that make sense because there's still a missing gap in the Hexerei team at the minute, but that would probably solve the issue. It wouldn't necessarily be the greatest because it would make Varka very cost inefficient compared to somebody like Jabai, who can literally skip out on Columbina and still perform amazingly on 4-star teammates, but it would at least save his damage situation and make a situation in which Varka can match up to other 6.x units. So while I don't necessarily think he is trash, it is undeniable that he does have the core major issue of just generally being a bit too weak for a character of this level of hype. Another thing that I should mention is that while he can be saved in the sense that he can perform decently with his signature, if you don't have his signature, well then it really is just cooked. You do need that SIG. If you're not planning on getting his SIG, It really sucks, but Varka's just not worth it right now. It does make me sad that a character I like so much is releasing in such a state, but I don't think it's worth it. I just can't say in good faith, yeah, this character is completely fun to get free to play with absolutely no investment into him whatsoever. The extra investment is kind of gonna be needed. He's not exactly a standard character. Like, he's not complete rubbish, I should make that clear. But he's definitely below the current standard, and unfortunately, for a character that's been hyped up for this long, that's just not good enough. All around, I do hope he gets buffs, and I'm still excited for Varka to come out. I can't wait to explore with him and just do everything with him. He's really cool. But I will admit, his meta position is not looking super favorable right now. He's not down in the dumps terrible, but he's not great either. And that is worth mentioning. Hopefully this video was able to tell you Varka's biggest pros and cons. This has been Juice, signing out, and no matter what, even if Hoyoverse gave you negative damage, I would still pull for you, Varka.